Welcome to Spirit Flow, the sacred space where we believe spiritual health is the foundation of everything. I'm Tara, and I created this show to support women who are ready to reconnect with their essence, clear energetic blocks, and lead from their soul. When we're spiritually aligned, our health, our relationships, and our purpose begin to flow with ease. Each week, we'll explore the deeper layers of healing through conversations, reflections, and multidimensional lenses: spiritual, energetic, physical, and metaphysical. Let's step into the flow.
Welcome back to Spirit Flow. Today, I want to talk about the fog. Not the fog that we experience like when we're driving, but that hazy in-between feeling we move through at some point. You know, the one where nothing's exactly wrong, but nothing feels clear either. It can feel really confusing to be in and even frustrating. But what if that fog isn't something to fear? What if it is actually guiding you back to something deeper? You know, have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, okay, I'm doing all the things, I'm journaling, I'm doing the breath work, I'm doing the rituals, but something still feels off? Like you're stuck in a loop you just can't shift. Me too. I've been there so many times. And if that's where you are now, let me just say you're not broken and you're not doing it wrong. You just might be on the edge of something new. A quiet, it's like this quiet turning point before the clarity comes. And a few weeks ago, I was right there, deep in the fog. And you know what? I took myself into nature, into ceremony, and I asked, what am I not seeing? And with the help of a sacred teacher plant, something really shifted in me, really gently, really powerfully. And a part of me had been actually gripping on so tightly, and I was able to finally let go. And in that release, everything changed. And today I want to share what opened for me and how it ties back to something I always come back to, the law of assumption. So take a breath with me and let's begin. So I want to share something close to the bone, something really close, not as a guide or mentor, but just as me, a woman doing the work, even when it's messy, especially actually when it's messy. A few weeks ago, I found myself sitting with a fog I just couldn't shake. The kind that doesn't go away with more rituals, more journaling, and more trying. And holding space for others, as so many of us do, can sometimes mean putting your own feelings on pause. So I followed a quiet pull, not to fix, not to escape, but just to listen. And alongside a dear sister, I entered ceremony with a sacred plant teacher, psilocybin. I want to be clear here, this is my story, not a recommendation. And I want to also share that my relationship with plant medicine began back in 2009 in Peru, where I was first introduced to the deep sacred frequencies that these teachers carry. And since then, I've approached them with the utmost respect, always within intentional ceremonial containers. This wasn't recreational and it wasn't about escape. I chose to enter into an altered state because I needed to access a layer of insight I couldn't reach through my usual practices. And I did so in a really safe, grounded space, supported by experience and deep reverence. Because when you've been holding space for others for so long, sometimes your soul just gently asks you to be held too by the earth, by spirit, and by something far older and wiser than you. And I want to note here that every plant carries its own frequency. It has its own unique spirit, its own unique signature essence, if you like. So, for example, a huasca is often felt as this wise mother. She's fierce and loving, and she shows you what you need to see, even if it's uncomfortable. And she holds you through the unraveling and the remembering. San Pedro, he carries the energy of the grandfather. He's very steady, he's very grounded, very heart-centered. And his medicine moves like a warm embrace, helping you see life through compassion and clarity. And then there's psilocybin, the wild sister energy. She dances, she giggles, she spirals you through memory and metaphor. And you know what? She doesn't push, she plays. Her frequency is deeply feminine, intuitive, and sometimes surprising. And she meets you where you are and gently shows you what's underneath the surface with wonder, not judgment. And each one offers a different kind of medicine. Not better, not worse, just tuned into different frequencies of healing. So I went into ceremony with a very clear intention. What am I not seeing? I asked to be shown gently, with play, with lightness, because intention to me is everything. It shapes the energy and it sets the tone. It's what turns a moment into ceremony. So after we opened our space and sat with the medicine, we took ourselves into nature. We took ourselves into a private beach where the land could actually hold us. So we had no distractions, no roles to play, just the ocean, the earth, and us. And then the feelings came, all of them. The medicine moved in waves, really soft, really visual, and really vibrant for me. She met me through color, through patterns and shapes. And where I'm actually normally short-sighted, so I can't see in the distance, suddenly everything, even far off in the distance, felt incredibly clear to me. And she showed me what I'd been clouding my inner vision, the mental static. Yep, all those thoughts looping over and over again, really unhelpful, unsupportive, and unconscious. And I saw how that noise was shaping my reality, affecting the energy I was bringing into my work, my home, my relationships. And it was like, it was distorting things with chaos and confusion. And beneath that, the guilt. I had a lot of guilt coming up and rising up in my system. Guilt for not being fully present with my kids while I worked. Guilt for not softening into love with my partner. Guilt for not letting myself receive the love that's actually already here. And it was a lot. But instead of pushing it away, I chose to feel it. I allowed those waves to carry me through it all. I let the sand hold it. I actually went out down into the sand and I drew spirals into the earth. And the spirals, as I was drawing them, were this beautiful reminder that we must look inward before we can spiral outward again. And then we let it be simple. We went back, we had a bath, we watched the sunset in silence, we drank cacao with reverence. And the next morning, we actually got up early, we swam in the ocean and we watched the sunrise. We allowed the waves to hold us and we allowed the sunrise to warm our skin. It was exactly what we needed. Not a breakthrough, not like this big aha moment, just this beautiful, soft remembering. And everything we were searching for is already within us. And we need to come back to that and remember that. Because when we give ourselves space to see, even through the fog, the clarity comes gently, one breath at a time. Okay, this is the part I really want to share because the magic, it doesn't end when the ceremony closes. That's actually when the real work begins. I didn't rush to wrap it all up in meaning. I didn't try to turn it into like this neat quote or post for Instagram. I just had to let it be. I let it breathe through my system. And so I listened to my body. I had to move slowly. I had to walk barefoot on earth. And I sang while I was cooking dinner. I let the tears come when they needed to. And I stayed in the body. And when things got a bit too much, I used kinesiology to gently clear what had surfaced, not to fix, but just to release what was never mine to carry. I tuned into sound, into stillness, and into my breath. Because here's what I know deep in my bones. Insight without integration is like seeing the sunrise, but never stepping outside to feel it warm your skin. And we didn't come here just to see the light. We came to live in it. And that's what I hold for the women I work with too. It's not just about breakthrough, it's about what happens after. It's about the quiet integration, the rewiring. You know, that space to meet the energy behind the insight and let it reshape you from the inside out. And so this journey into nature, into stillness, and into the sacred space held by the teacher plant wasn't just a healing experience. It was this deep remembering for me, a remembering that everything truly begins within us. And it can be so easy to forget that when life is full, like when you're juggling work, when you're parenting, you're relationshiping, and those ending like to-do lists. When our nervous systems are in this loop of reactivity, it can feel like life is happening to us. But this experience offered me a sacred pause, a breath. It helped me feel something I've long known, but I hadn't embodied lately. That our inner state is not a side note in our reality, it is the blueprint. And this is exactly what the law of assumption teaches us. And you may have heard of this, maybe even seen it online. And I just want to say it's not this another like manifestation hack. It's a profound energetic truth. And it's one that the mystic teacher Neville Goddard dedicated his life to sharing with the world. Neville learned from his spiritual teacher, Abdullah, who was this wise Ethiopian mystic from Harlem, who taught that we are not passive participants in our life. We are these conscious creators. And the assumptions that carry within us about who we are, about what's possible, about what we deserve, are creating our lived experiences moment by moment. And so here's how it works. When you assume something to be true, not just in thought, but in feeling, it begins to solidify. It starts as energy and it starts to become matter. So your life reshapes itself to match the inner reality that you've committed to. So whether that assumption is like nothing ever works out for me, or I am deeply supported in all I do, both are prayers, right? Both are those blueprints, and both call reality to respond accordingly. This is why it's not enough to know something mentally. We must live it vibrationally. We must feel into it. We must breathe into it, move through life as if it's already true. Because the energetic state, that's the signal that brings the new reality into form. And that's what happened for me during the ceremony. I didn't ask for just insight. I assumed it would come. I didn't just like hope and pray for clarity. I embodied the vibration of receiving it. I created an energetic field that said, look, I trust this moment. I trust what's ready to be revealed. And that intention opened the door. From there, what I noticed is that the veil started to lift, the static started to soften, and the truths that had been buried under all these layers of noise and guilt and pressure, they started to rise gently to the surface. Not to shame me, but just to free me. And that's the beauty of the law of assumption. It's not about just, thinking positive or bypassing your feelings. No, it's about claiming a deeper truth and living as if it's already unfolding. Because when we start to assume we are safe, life begins to feel safer. When we assume we are worthy, opportunities begin to reflect that worth. When we assume we are loved, our relationships begin to meet us at that level. And it's not wishful thinking. I really want to press that into our minds here. It's not wishful thinking. It's what we call energetic alignment. So here's the invitation. What are you assuming to be true about your life, about your path, your body, your worthiness? Because those assumptions are not passive. They're creating everything. And the good news, you can choose again. And while I'm here, I really just want to walk through some of the core lessons Neville Goddard brought in his book, because I really feel that these hold so much wisdom. And his first lesson was that consciousness is the only reality. So number one was consciousness is the only reality. And I want to make mention that this is the foundation of it all, like everything. It begins in consciousness. What you think, what you imagine, what you feel, what you speak, what you focus on, That's the energy you're living in. And that energy is what your outer world reflects back to you. And so, look, this isn't just some sort of like beautiful poetic concept, it's vibrational law. So if your inner world is crowded with fear, with self-doubt, with scarcity, then of course your outer world is going to feel heavy, feel limited, feel stuck. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because that's the frequency you're broadcasting. But the moment you start to begin to nurture trust, clarity, abundance, peace, your world begins to reflect that back to you. It's not magic, it's what we call resonance. And so the inner part of you truly does create the outer, always. And once you see that and experience that, you can't unsee it. The second lesson that he talks about is that assumptions harden into fact. And what I really like about this is this one's big because it's simple and it's so easy to overlook because your assumptions are not passive. They're not just thoughts floating around. What they are these instructions to the universe. So if you assume things won't work out, you know what? They probably won't. If you assume you're unworthy of love or success, you'll unconsciously filter out the evidence that says otherwise. But here's the good news. If you assume that good things are on their way, that you're supported, that you're safe to receive, guess what? Life starts aligning with that too. And no, this isn't about like fake positivity or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about choosing a new internal narrative and staying faithful to it, even when the outer world hasn't caught up yet, because it will. That's the law. Your assumption, when repeated and felt, becomes your experience. The third lesson he talks about is to think fourth dimensionally. Okay, so this one can kind of sound a little abstract, but stay with me. Thinking fourth dimensionally is really about closing the grip of the senses. It means stepping away from the current facts of your life, like what you see, what you hear, what you experience, and instead imagining from the end state of what you want. So, not dreaming of it like from a distance, but living in it energetically now. You become the version of who you already want to be, the one that has the clarity, the one that has the love, the one that has the peace. You feel her, you embody her, you move like her. And in doing that, you begin to align with that future reality. That's the alchemy, bringing that future self into the now. So it's not about like hoping it all works out. It's actually about becoming the frequency of the life you desire before it arrives. Because you create the shift inside, and what happens? The outside follows. The fourth lesson he talks about is no one to change but self. And this one's really tender and sometimes a little confronting, but it's also incredibly, incredibly empowering. The people in your life, they're often reflecting something back to you. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they're showing you the assumptions and the stories you're carrying about yourself, often deep in your subconscious. So maybe someone makes you feel invisible. Is there a part of you that doesn't fully see yourself yet? Maybe someone isn't treating you with respect. So is there a belief still in you that says that you have to prove your worth? And you know what? This isn't about blame. It's about taking your power back. Because when you shift the way you see yourself, the way you assume yourself to be, the outer world has no choice but to shift with you. And so what happens is the dynamic changes. The relationship starts to soften, or sometimes it just clears altogether. And so the magic happens when you rewrite that inner story and project that truth into the world around you. And the last lesson I want to talk about, the fifth lesson, is about remaining faithful to your idea. And this is the part where so many of us get stuck because we want to see the change before we believe it. And that's not how it works. You have to believe it before it arrives. You have to stay faithful to the vision, to the frequency, to the the felt sense of what you're calling in. Even when nothing in your external world looks different, especially then, you hold that inner state as truth. And so it's not about pretending, it's about trusting. Trusting that what you are creating within is already forming. That reality is just catching up. And what we notice in this process is that faith is the bridge. It's what keeps you grounded when the old stories try to creep back. It's what keeps you centered when life starts to have those wobbles and shakes, when it starts to feel uneasy. And this is how we become conscious creators, not through control or hustle, but through deep inner alignment, devotion, and the willingness to stay faithful to the truth that already lives inside of you. So that foggy windshield, that feeling where everything feels like it's a little heavy, a little unclear, maybe even disconnected, I want to share with you, it's not something to fix. It's actually a signal. It's a quiet nudge from your soul saying something is ready to shift. And when you honor that nudge, and when you soften instead of resist, when you pause instead of push, what happens is the fog begins to clear, not through force, but through flow. And what you'll notice is that you'll stop forcing and start receiving. And that's a big one. When you stop controlling things and you allow the natural flow, you can start to allow that flow just to circle round and round. You actually start to stop questioning and start knowing in a different way. And you stop seeking answers outside of you and start to lead from the inside out. And the most beautiful part, this isn't about someone new and becoming someone new. And the most beautiful part, this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about peeling back the noise and remembering who you've always been. Clear, grounded, radiant, wise, in rhythm with your body, your breath, your truth, and in alignment with your soul's natural frequency. Because that's the real path of spiritual health. Not chasing more, but clearing the way for what's already within you to start to rise up. So if anything I shared today stirred something within you, if it sparked a warmth in your heart, I'd truly love to hear from you. So come sit with me over on Instagram at tara.hegarty, or maybe even explore some of the offerings I've created at tarahegarty.com. And I want to say that spiritual health, you know what? It changes everything. And it's not just this concept, it's this lived, felt, embodied path back to who you really are. So until next time, with love always, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for sharing space with me today. If this episode resonated, come find me on Instagram at tara.hegarty to keep the conversation going. You'll find all of the resources we talked about on today's show linked in my bio under podcast resources. Until next time, remember, spiritual health changes everything.